What a movie. Lot to talk about, but let me get started with my favorite segment of all time. Advocate Sonny. He's back. He's back.
I am back. And
you know, Sonny, like I haven't personally podcasted with you before, but I understand you are extraordinarily familiar with legal procedures in India and otherwise throughout the entire world. So I think I might take a backseat through this entire review and just have you explain to me the minutia of why pigeons might fly through a courtroom and their significance to Rule 59.
There's very good reasons for that, and I'll start citing the precedent to work you through exactly the reason for that. I will heavily caveat and say that, look, I'm not an actual practicing lawyer, but I will give some views, potentially uninformed, but I will throw it out there just in case. Look, I think
Please don't take this as legal advice.
Yeah, heavily caveated. I don't need to be sued, or should I actually do what the movie says? Go ahead and sue me.
Sue me.
The movie translates sue me. Yes, sue me. Look, the legal drama in this overall, I think, is done really well in terms of trying to balance the reality of what the minutiae and the mundaneness of court process with trying to do away with some of that, because ultimately it is a movie and you need to continue to entertain the audience. So I think it does a fairly good job in representing the legal process. There are elements of it that aren't so representative, which I can touch on very quickly. But in terms of what it does really well, I think just the really boring aspects of the legal process, you have to write down your complaint to the police before it can go anywhere. The fact that you go through your examination and cross-examination of witnesses, you have, the accused moving from one side of the courtroom to the witness box in the other side because they're suddenly the claimant trying to bring a case forward. So all of that stuff, it's kind of focused on to a level that isn't usual in cinema, which I really appreciate. One of the things that I really, really appreciated about this film, though, is just showing you the length of these court processes. Yeah. Because in the span of this movie, I think it's Rajeevan his wife is pregnant, gives birth to a child, and that child is already 1 or 2 years old before we finally get a verdict on this big court case, I guess, that is the central drama of this film. And that is absolutely representative of the legal system in most jurisdictions. It varies, and maybe in India things take a really long time, but even here in Australia, a simple trial could take up to 12 to 18 months, depending on just how many witnesses you need to bring forward, selection of juries, reselection of jury members. It all takes time, and you have that old adage of justice delayed is justice denied. And that also applies here because you have this, I guess, the reputational damage to Rajeevan hanging over him for such a long time. And at some point there's a sunk cost, and he needs to see this through until the end, especially as the stakes start escalating throughout this film. So I really appreciated that part of kind of the legal drama. I also really appreciated the fact that they continually reinforce the message that whatever you're trying to prove in court, you have to have evidence to back it up. There is a huge tendency in courtroom dramas to just make blanket assertions. And because they're so radical, no one's talking about the right to actually, provide evidence to back these points up. But the judge kind of reinforces that a couple of times, which I really appreciated. So overall, does a lot of things really well. A couple of the elements of this film that I felt like not quite representative, probably the fact that there was some bits of evidence that were just introduced randomly into court without providing it to the other side. Like, you can't introduce a huge piece of adverse information like a video on TikTok of someone in a car or the auto rickshaw driver and not give the other side an opportunity to figure out how they're going to deal with that information. That just wouldn't happen. They explain it away in one instance with one bit of information, but there's a couple of instances of that. Probably the last thing is that the advocates for the government side or the minister side, they are at times comically incompetent. Which I think if you're a high-powered
several times
minister of state, exactly. If you're like a high-powered, wealthy minister of state, you are getting the best advocates out there to represent your case. And it is a hallmark of the best lawyers that they can take the weakest case and still spin something into creating reasonable doubt, or at least make it more competitive than this case was. And yet you had Rajeevan, a guy who hasn't got a formal education, out there owning the opposition and owning these advocates, which just isn't kind of entirely believable in my point of view, but maybe it's there for that comedic effect as well. So I can forgive some of that. The one other thing I'll mention, just quickly in passing, the fact that the motorcyclist's death is only brought up at the end of the legal drama, very surprising given it's the death of the motorcycle that is the motorcyclist who's died in the pothole that is so central to all of this. The fact that you only understand that he's passed away at the end was a bit surprising. That something so key to the premise should have come out sooner, I think.
I totally agree with you. That's where, like, and I'll get into this more as we get further into the discussion, but there were a few elements there, and I think everything you were just talking about, like, really succinctly kind of listed everything I loved the most about the movie and everything I was a little bit frustrated by as pertains to the movie. Because at its core, that's what it wanted to be. It wanted to be a legal drama with a little bit of levity.
Yes.
But we were set up with a movie that was going to be about this man and his redemption arc. And he's also owning it in the courts, but we don't get much of his history other than he once was a thief. Now he's going to have a child. He needs to prove to his wife that he wasn't a thief. And that seemed to be like the central motivator to me. Why is he so dead set on doing this? Because he wants to prove it to her. She's not even there when he gets proved innocent. You know, she's not even there when like the major breaks occur. Like, there were these ebbs and flows, and I really kind of felt at the end of it all, man, wouldn't this have been better as a mini series? Because all of the seeds for everything I wanted more of were there, but it bore no fruit. Now, still a fantastic legal drama that really paid off in dividends, and like you said, the width and breadth of the timeline was incredible. And the fact that it showed us all that stuff. Like, I was joking before we started recording that this reminded me kind of My Cousin Vinny, but it's pretty similar in that it like leans into the legal minutia, like what is actually kind of a pain about going to court, and, you know, Joe Pesci getting thrown out and Joe Pesci needing to relearn the process and not actually getting what he needs and having to prove what he needs to prove. So those two movies seem kind of similar. It's just that in My Cousin Vinny, we were really, really leaning into the comedy, and then we got a little bit of a dramatic kind of showstopper that really honed in on the message and made us feel like the comedy was worth something, like the comedy was building to something. And in this, I really wanted to see what the justice that was ultimately delivered to the entire family, I really wanted to see that matter more kind of in an exploded scale. And in some way we get that when the news shows up, right? But it just, like, the movie felt like it wanted to be three things, and it succeeded really well in one of them and okay in the other two. But you just hit in every single thing that you said, all of the stuff that I loved, didn't like, but you could tell it took itself so seriously in those moments. Like, we want you to know what this looks like. And I appreciated that. I love seeing that. I love seeing all of that. I love learning about that. But I wanted to know more about him and his family too. You know?
100%.
Yeah. No, it's you brought up some, that was a great dissection, Sonny, about sort of, you know, the whole courtroom procedure. The thing that I really liked about this was the perspective that we're getting through this sort of, you know, this thief, uneducated in some senses, like the struggles that someone like that would have in this situation, right? Like, he has issues with, I think at the first time he can't write a complaint because he has spelling mistakes.
Yes.
And there's other times when I think there's this really good scene where his performance is which we'll touch on, but like there's a scene when the magistrate is talking to him and explaining to him about evidence, and he can't understand what he's saying. And he just sort of has a blank look, and he's like, "Yeah, okay, yes," until he breaks it down further and further.
Yes,
you know. So we got to see like I wouldn't even say a common man, like someone that's really like, you know, against the wall. So it does show you, I think it showed that side pretty well, like the struggle that, you know, someone from his position has to sort of go through. There are some things, yes, with the plot, which I think are a bit, you know, coincidental or go in his favor a lot of the time. You know, like the judge coming to his house all of a sudden and sort of helping him out. That's sort of kind of like a blessing. There's small things like that. But I do want to, it's funny you mentioned about sort of how serious I wanted to take this, Doug. But at the same time, this movie is freaking hilarious. Like it is all out comedy basically from basically start to finish. Just I think the very like first scene, it's like he swims across like the lake or an ocean or something like that to get to Tamil Nadu, and he's basically with his friend, and he says, "I don't do anything. I just know Tamil well," and the other guy digs wells, and I was like, This movie setting itself up for a comedy so well.
And the
I just
police
love that about it.
And the police in Kerala being like, well, it's out of our jurisdiction now.
Yeah, immediately.
Like, there's no, like, I guess we'll inform the police in Tamil Nadu. No, not so much.
No, I love that. And I love the fact that he's, just kind of slowly ingratiating himself along. And he's just kind of like he's not like a bumbling idiot. He's a charming, enigmatic man that is clearly trying to do something. And like the movie always underpins that. It underscores that. And one of the, like, I don't want to say my favorite scenes too early, but what you hit when you were talking about the legal drama and having to cross from one stand to the next, I laughed for 5 minutes solid when he had to go from one box to the other box, and then he had to come back, and he even says to him later on, he's like, it's starting to really hurt. Can I just go this way? And he's like, go whatever way you want. Like, yeah, of course, you can go wherever.
Yeah. And the amount of times they kept saying that the dog bit like half my ass off, like,
so good. And the magistrate inexplicably repeating the two dogs' name under his breath
all
every
the time
it comes up. I didn't understand why he was doing that, but it was deeply hilarious to me. I also thought one of the most hilarious characters was the auto rickshaw guy and his romance with the teacher, where he's like, I can't possibly come to court that day. I've got a date with the teacher. No, thinking that is a very legitimate excuse to dodge your civil obligations and to help another friend.
And then he's like, I don't have a suit. I don't have a way to get there. I don't have a coat to go to court. But I also loved, and I referred to him as Indian Pauly Shore, the guy who immediately comes in after Rajavan, jumps over the fence, and he's the guy with like the crazy windbreaker on, like making all the weird noises in court. And they're like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
He's just, who is that guy? I love that guy.
Punches the cop. Love it. Yeah.
For no reason.
Oh, man. Yeah. The movie was really, really funny, man. There's so many funny moments in this. And I don't know, it kept it, like, it is right, because it is actually a pretty serious situation that this guy's going through. And it is like, the premise itself is kind of unbelievable to start with. Like, and I did want to actually ask you about that, Sunny, before we sort of carry on and talk about some of the performances in this. In terms of this case, actually, like, being said in reality, like, to blame the minister for something. I don't know what the movie's trying to do, the overall message about what we're trying to do, but there's no way this could actually happen. Like, or has it happened? Do you know of situations like this?
Well, I don't know that you blame a minister, but you can certainly sue people for failure or negligence to do their job. So here in Australia, if you went over a pothole and it destroyed your car in some way, you could sue your local council for cash for failure to maintain the pothole. Whether that goes all the way up to the minister of the state, I'm not really sure, because I think to make that out, you need to show they have actual knowledge of that specific pothole, that they didn't fix it within a reasonable amount of time, and it was reasonable for them to fix it with the resources they have available. So I reckon it'd be pretty unlikely that this would go all the way to the top. And even if you just want to see your local council, I think it'd be a tough slog trying to get this over the line, because you have to prove knowledge on behalf of the council workers and failure to act within a reasonable time, and that they should treat it as a priority given all the other functions they would have to be doing as council members. So it'd be a tough slog, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I honestly thought that's where the movie succeeded extraordinarily well, in that it utilized what was a framework of a very real court proceeding to be able to give us that really insane ultimate storyline, right? So I viewed it as like an explosion outward from just a wild idea that Rajavan had at one point, where he was, it was the pothole that did it, and potholes are going to be under the jurisdiction of this person, so he's at fault. And then just backing out and exploding outward from there, finding about the rickshaw, like remembering about the rickshaw, remembering about this person, remembering about this person. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it proved that all of those things were connected in such that he eventually got to the point where he understood, no, this is who I actually named the person who was responsible for this, because by the time we get to the end of the movie, he's not just responsible for the potholes, he's responsible for gross negligence, and having told everyone who is supposed to be benefiting from his leadership and his insertion in the community that he's doing right, that he's building it better, and he realizes that he's showing everyone at some point that he's not. So that's where the needle kind of got threaded for me. That's where I got a little bit in the middle, where I was like, man, why are we doing this court stuff over and over and over again? It was like, because each time he goes there, it deepens his own knowledge of what potentially could come of a verdict in his favor. Is that it's a win for everyone. It's a win for his family, but it's also a win for everyone. And I thought the movie did that really well, because we use the humor to keep us engaged, or the action sequences, which were fantastic. I loved those too. They were really good. But using that as a way to kind of be like, every time we went to court, our scope widened, but at the same time, the focus shrank on the person who we were ultimately blaming for this pothole. And I thought that was really, really smart. I just feel like the family dynamic suffered as a result. Again, if this had been a miniseries, I think all that stuff would have been there. Like, imagine a Better Call Saul type show, and it's all just this story, but we have several hours to tell it over, right? 4 or 5 hours. We could have gotten all that stuff. What we did get was wonderful, and I loved it. I just wanted more.
No, it's interesting because, like, it is like a 2.5-hour movie, I think it is. So, but even in that, 2 hours 20, I think the focus was really on, that procedural element. And I think what they lost in that was probably the backstory and the family dynamic and all that. But in saying that, I did really appreciate how the wife, or the lover, Devi, basically how she did sort of have a strong presence, because she sort of eggs him on whenever it's required. Like, I think at the way start, he has a line where is again the comedy, the dialogue in this is hilarious. He says something like what should I do, bite the dog's ass in retaliation? and then she says something like, you should get back at the people responsible for all this. And that sort of leads to the whole journey of him sort of starting and finding out everything. And then that's sort of one thing that's there. So I did like her presence in the movie whenever she was there. Like, I think there's another scene when the press first start coming, and like he very much is saying like, no, I don't want to deal with this. And she sort of stands up and says, no, we're going to have to do this case. And something like, we've come so far, some lines like that. So she had a strong presence in this. But I do want to talk a little bit on the performances in this movie, because there were some pretty spectacular ones, especially with our main man, Kunchacko Boban, man. And trust me, if you're listening, we are going to get onto the dancing sequence. If you're just waiting for us to talk about that, we'll talk about that for sure.
We talked briefly before the show, and this would have been an entire dance discussion if we hadn't like actually sat down and said that there needed to be a structure, and we needed to talk about the plot, legal stuff. No, we will get there.
We'll get there, definitely. But his performance in this one was spectacular, and the thing I loved about it, like he spoke in a very like different accent. I don't know if you guys noticed, he spoke very differently. Like, I could tell that there was something that he's done for this character, so he's fully gone into this character, which was amazing. But
I don't know if I observed this right as well. Was his jaw kind of a little bit?
That's what I was going to say. He was definitely doing like a Billy Bob in Sling Blade, like.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
He was holding it forward a little bit. And I think that really informed a lot of different things. That kind of allowed him to blend into the background when he needed to, but also when he like started to assert himself, that his jaw would kind of slide back. Like when he knew he was being confident and when he had something to really say, all his posture would kind of change. And I thought he was wonderful. Like I had said before, I think the magistrate was still my favorite part of the entire movie, his performance, but it only works because this other performance was so wonderful. And he really played that common man, kind of just salt of the earth type of guy really well. He really played somebody who was trying to do something really well. He played sympathetic really well. And the scene that really hit 100%. Me was when he went to try to get the other motorcyclist to come and be in court, and he was holding his passport and was just about to rip it, and it only took that one moment. Like you could see in his eyes, like you helped me, like that was incredible. That's all just subtle acting. That's very Mohanlal, like we talked about. That was all in the eyes and just the way that he stood 100%. There. And it was amazing.
And one of the aspects of his character I really loved, he did the endearing part of his character really well, the evoking empathy. This man who's trying to change his life because he's found a woman he loves, wants to live a quiet family life with her and turn his life around, does that terrifically well. But there's also this kind of sly cheekiness to his character as well, which never quite leaves from the start of the film when he is that petty thief to the end, I think, where he's a little bit of an enigma at times, I think, and you don't exactly know what he's thinking or what the grand plan is, but the wheels are turning in his head. But that mischievousness never really leaves his personality, which I really did appreciate because, and maybe we'll get onto this in the plot section, but there's a part of this film where I didn't take for granted that he was innocent because it never showed you the sequence of events that followed him jumping the wall or how he got there. And he did go out that night after his wife told him there isn't enough money or we don't have enough food here. And so part of me was like, oh, actually, is this guy actually innocent, or has he found a great way to pull off this great heist that will be revealed towards the end of the film? So he balanced that quite well. And then in the second part of the film, it becomes quite obvious that he's innocent. But I certainly didn't take that for granted because
I thought the exact same thing. There was the scene where he was pulling the rickshaw driver up the stairs, and he's like, "I don't want to be a part of this." And I was like, "Oh, are we actually about to get the fact that, like, did they Ocean's 11 this? Like, are we about to learn that what they're accusing them of actually happened?" And that other scene you mentioned where he leaves the house and he has that really sly look in his eye where she's like, "He'll never learn the error of his ways," and he kind of has that like,
precisely.
You know, like he's teed up so well to just be somebody who but that my dad was like that, where like if he was going to get into mischief, it didn't matter if it was good or bad. It was always the same face, right? Like if he was about to go like play Santa Claus for me, it was like, you know, or if he was about to go drinking with his buddies, same thing, right? And I really enjoyed that about his performance, where he absolutely is painted as somebody who could be capable of this stuff, had previously been capable of this stuff, and that's you'll hear me bring it up a couple more times. I just really wanted to see, because you had mentioned it already, Amit, that his wife, his girlfriend had done. She's clearly his motivator. She's clearly the driving force behind him, and she's clearly his consciousness. But why is she that level of his consciousness? And why does he care so much about her knowing that he's innocent? That was the one thing I really felt like, if there's one puzzle piece that needed to be put in there a little bit more sternly, it was that. But otherwise, you know, it's solid. Like by the time you get to the end and you see that final just slow in to the new magistrate delivering, you know, the final judgments, you're happy, you're thrilled, you're really excited that this family is just going to get a chance to be who they wanted to be. And it's great. And the fact that it even went into COVID, like, that was another really great, amazing.
No, it really was. I really like that. And I think you're right about the cheekiness. That's a really good point, because like it's like he stays true to who he is throughout the entire movie, right? Because we see him outside the courtroom, we see him inside the courtroom, but he basically stays the same character wherever he is, and that sort of causes issues in the courtroom, which honestly leads to some hilarious scenes with him sort of standing up. And I think one of my favorite ones was when he lifts his hand up and he's about to smack the other magistrate, and he jumps, and everyone is like, you know, shocked by what he's done. But he's you know, he at the end he's trying to prove a point the best way that he can, staying true to who he is. And you know, I really appreciated how they just sort of made him stay that way throughout the entire movie. So his performance to that, and to sort of, you know, segue a little bit to the magistrate as well, because I want to give him a bit more love here. Their back and forth, I think, might have been like, I don't know if the magistrate was my favorite part of the movie, but because there's a dancing, but but essentially the back and forth between the what do you call it, Rajiv and the magistrate was so good. Those two riffed off each other so well, and it was so good that it almost made the other characters disappear. Like the other advocates almost felt like they were kind of forgotten, because those two were just so dynamic and just riffing off each other so well. But man, what do you guys think about this magistrate and how his performance was? Because I'm just going to give you some information here. This is this guy's debut movie. He's not acted before. And to add on top of that, this was the first time he's been inside a courtroom. He had not gone to a courtroom before he was auditioned for this movie.
Oh my God.
Blew my mind. 57-year-old debut movie, and he did this kind of role.
It was amazing. Knowing that, you can't, what could you couldn't fault anything about his performance other than the fact that he isn't the final magistrate in the movie, which I would have loved to see, but I totally get.
Yeah.
Him looking at the birds as they were flying through the courtroom was amazing.
Throwing almonds at them.
Yeah, throwing the almonds. Like, it just immediately, as I was watching him, I think from the moment he heard the case, he knew who was at fault, and he knew that Madhavan was innocent. He knew. He just needed to see proof. He needed to groom, and he had also heard, a lot of schlock stories, and he'd been in the court for so long that he's a little bit burnt out by the proceedings, but he's also so steadfast, and it needs to happen in a certain way because it needs to be documented because somebody else is going to reference this precedent at some point. So he just effortlessly is writing and responding with those little quips like, "I've warned you, you're going to get out of here." He was incredible. Just that slightly hunched over, always paying attention, but never paying too direct attention. And the fact that he gives equal amount of guff to both opposition both parties, so that the guy representing our ultimate villain, like when he leans into him and when he starts lashing out at him, I was like, yes, like he is supposed to be impartial, right? He is supposed to be sitting in the back, and he's supposed to incentivize a good argument between two parties. And in that, he succeeds super well, but he never... he must have gotten one of the pigeons, because we see that scene where he's holding the one in the car.
He's all
like, so does he want to keep it? I don't know. I just love that scene.
I will observe two things. Go on, Doug.
I was just going to say, all that is a long way to say, I love that man.
That's a great segue, because I also love that man. And I'll make two additional observations, which you touched on, Doug. Firstly, I thought there is a judge being represented in the best possible light of what a judge should be or a magistrate should be, because he's someone who's able to take the substance over the form of what Rajeevan is saying. Rajeevan doesn't have that courtroom etiquette. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't understand court processes. But the magistrate knows that he's making good observations, that he has legitimate inquiries to ask of the opposition, and he gives him the time to ask those questions. He doesn't let the form of his asking those questions get in the way. He pulls him back sometimes when the etiquette goes too far, when he kind of swears or uses profanity in court, but he gives him his time to speak and raise his case in the best possible light. I think the second thing I appreciated was, I think you see caricatures of what judges and magistrates are in a whole lot of TV shows and films. They're usually like dithering old men who are bored, uninterested. Janagana Mana is a good example. It was an incompetent judge who didn't really know what was going on and let the advocates rule the court, basically. He was a man who is extremely committed to getting to justice, but also trying to preserve the decorum of his office and run a tight ship at the same time. And that's just such a nuance that I haven't seen represented in cinema or TV that well, I think. And you also see that he believes in justice, because I think Rajeevan and someone else appeals to his sense of justice. He says, isn't a magistrate there when God isn't there to defend you? And that...
when he's trying to manipulate him? Yeah.
Yes, yeah. But he has that kind of sense of, I am here to find the truth here. I'm not meant to be getting involved in these, courtroom etiquette skirmishes. He remembers what the ultimate role he is there to perform is. And he treats the minister the same way he treats an ordinary person. And that is the great thing about the law. Everyone is equal before it. So I just thought he kind of fulfilled that role of a magistrate so well, and in a somewhat inspiring way. And also uniquely for Malayalam films, it is overall a fairly optimistic view of the legal system, somewhat untouched by corruption. Usually it's all about corruption, police being corrupt,
very good point,
being corrupt. And here we have a slow court process, but ultimately justice is served at the end of the day. And it has that slightly optimistic ending at the end, which in a satirical film, it could have gone the other way. You could have gone Mukundan Unni dark, uncompromising ending. But here, I like that they still had that kind of optimistic view of the justice system, which, was a good counterbalance to some of the other Malayalam films we've seen, I think, where the corruption wins out overall, or the machinery grinds down the ordinary person.
Agreed. Yeah. I also think that, speaking of that, like what what was also kind of refreshing to see is we didn't really get a twist. Everything was earned.
No.
There was, you could make an argument, I guess, that some of the evidence that was presented, like the TikTok videos or the CCTV from the helmet cam, right? That's a twist, but it wasn't a twist because it's just new people coming in to serve as witnesses.
Yes.
And I think that it was great that the end of the movie didn't land on, like, I appreciate that and I love that in Drishyam, let's say Drishyam 1 and Drishyam 2. I love that, but it was cool to see all of this actually be earned. So anytime I started thinking like, man, this scene is going on a while, it always had a payoff. And it ultimately did pay off by the end. And it just teed up for me a different landing than I thought I was going to get, right? Because of some of the comedy. Again, it was so enjoyable and I had a blast with it. And none of this stuff is criticism because, again, I can't make a movie. Somebody showed up off the street as a 57-year-old and acted the hell out of a part that I couldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. Amazing, right? All of my criticism is just rooted in the fact that I wanted to see more. That's it. But everything that you said was wonderful. And the only thing I wanted to add was the way that he constantly was leaning into the opposition to be like, get your client here.
Yeah.
Get him here.
Yes.
Get him here. Yeah. And never overblown about it. Just like in the scene where he was like, oh, his back hurts and his wife is pregnant. And he had half of his butt bitten off by a dog, and he shows up here every single day. He's like, get your client here. And then the way he treats him when he gets into the court, and he's like, are you feeling safe? Do you think you can stand? Okay, then get your chair out of here. Like how he immediately just removes the veneer of who a person is in society, and now you're just somebody standing in front of a magistrate, and we're making a decision about justice. Excellent.
Totally.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one final thing I'll note on the magistrate, he has these like small smiles throughout the course of the film where he's almost like the audience because he's appreciating the hilarity of what's going on. And I just love that because it's kind of a little knowing smile, or he knows that Rajeevan has hit on a nerve here or something funny is happening. And I just like that kind of almost self-referential or understanding the hilarity of what's going on.
Yeah, no, with the magistrate, what I wanted to sort of add on to you guys, because that was a great sort of breakdown of sort of how great this guy was. But essentially, man, like his whole role is just in that seat, right? Except for the one moment he steps out. Like, Kunchacko Boban, he has a few moments where he goes out, he has a few scenes everywhere. This guy's refined to just one area. He has to do everything there, no physical acting, nothing. It's just his face, his expressions, his smile. And what I loved about it was like, it was also like, they could have made him very, like procedural, or where you kind of like just have a role, but they gave him a lot of character, right? They gave him character, like when it sort of appealed to his whenever anyone mentions about God, he just sort of smiles or looks up, and that cracked me up as well. Like he's just like, as soon as he mentions, he's like, oh, okay, like and obviously his whole beef with the pigeons.
Yeah.
So he's a character in this movie. He's a huge character. He's not just there for sort of having judgment. But the part about justice is so right, because like there are parts where I thought it was inconsistent, because like I think there's a time when his wife says like, that date is the day of my, like, I'm giving birth on that day. Like, can we not change it? You changed it for the minister. Why can't you do it for me? But then we find out later on, it's like he knows he's on the way out, because he's obviously aging and he's going to retire. I think that's why he didn't want things to get pushed, because he's like, I want to see this out. I don't want a new magistrate to come and see what happens then. So I think there was, everything was rationalized, I think. So I think that was well done as well. So yeah, he was fantastic. We'll touch on a little bit now to sort of the more plot and storyline and stuff like that, because we've already touched on it quite a bit. So I don't know if we're going to spend too much time on this, but obviously there was, this is a very complex story, it seems like, even though, it's basically, one case and we're trying to solve that out, but, they go through the complexities of how long it takes. But how do you guys feel about just, how this unwinded? Like, obviously there's a whole, the process of finding everybody and getting all the sort of characters involved, and again they did a great job of just sort of making it so enjoyable. Every new character seems like they offer something new. We have the rickshaw driver who's his own character. We have this small scene with the bike rider who's like, what's your profession? I'm just a biker.
I love that guy.
I got tattoos and like
I travel the world on my bike, man.
Yeah, that's all. And everyone else is like so confused by what he's doing. But how did you guys find about sort of, getting into this? Like, did you feel like it was like, were you being dragged down by how long this was going, or frustrated by the fact that this was taking so long? Like it felt like, when will this case end? And sometimes, what did you guys feel about that? I'll pass it to you first, Sonny.
Yeah, look, the first half of this film really had me hooked because you had really interesting characters and a premise that I genuinely didn't know where this story was going in the first half. And as I mentioned before, I had a genuine thought in my mind that maybe Rajeevan was not innocent and that he's actually guilty of this. And that kept me really engaged. And then in the second half of the film, I think still an extremely enjoyable film, but the stakes kind of rise quite significantly, and I didn't quite understand why it rose so much, because if at the end of the day what Rajeevan wanted was to clear his name, he could have got that by blaming the contractors or the engineer or something, but he decides to go for the minister, and I couldn't kind of bridge the gap between him just wanting to be an ordinary person, get this case over with suddenly escalating it and adding all of these additional complexities now that he wants to go after the minister. There's this part where he has to seek approval from cabinet to bring a case against the minister, which as a footnote is incredible. And if that's built into the legal system, that is deeply concerning. But I didn't quite understand why he wanted to go and be the hero at the end of the film to such a degree, if all he wanted was for his wife to know that he was innocent and to get on with living his life with her and raising his child. The part where he suddenly wants to, expose this huge conspiracy, that didn't quite gel for me, I guess. But look, I found the plot really interesting. The second half of the film, I thought, also was bogged down in a lot of the, let's go find the witnesses, let's bring them to court. There was a lot of that, and it got a little bit, I guess, repetitive. So I think you could have shaved 10 to 15 minutes off this film and probably not lost a whole lot of the impact that it has. So look, I think the second half maybe a little bit too long. I think it loses some of the really enjoyable pace that the first half sets and drags it a little bit. But, maybe they're trying to create the ultimate impact and really delve into that courtroom drama, which really does become the focus in the second half of the film. And so they wanted to get into that detail, but I think they could have probably stayed a little away from that. And just that motivation of Rajeevan is always a bit of couldn't quite square the circle on that one.
Couldn't agree more. Next.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I will say I agree with you on all counts. I was engaged. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought the montage toward the beginning is why I feel the exact same way that you do, because that montage really sets up for us the fact that he and his girlfriend, his lover, are really building this life, and we're really going somewhere, and we're actually going to give this man a second chance. And then we see him go and be a little bit mischievous. So by the time we get into the courtroom stuff and her scenes become limited to being very powerful, yes, but not necessarily fleshed out, I felt like, well, no, there's more conversation to happen there. And I think we could have absolutely squashed some of that and just made those conversations about his motivation and wanting her to understand, because she has the one line where she's like, I need to know he's innocent before this child is born. That's it. That's the only line we get.
Yes.
And if he had just continued talking to these witnesses, that we have a scene where he almost rips somebody's passport so he can't leave so that he helps him. All he needed to say right then and there was, my girlfriend is about to have a baby, and she needs to know that I'm innocent. Like, I'm not the man I used to be. There were a few times in the movie where he could have just said that one line. Like, the scene could have been 10 seconds longer, and we could have lost some of the stuff toward the beginning to really hone in on that as the original motivation. And then we could have gotten a little bit longer scenes when the courtroom stuff really starts to hit, or let's say this, something like Mukundan's inner monologue. Right? Where he's realizing, I'm going to blame this guy. And then they're like, why would I say that? That's the first name that came to mind. That's why I said it. And then he was like, oh,
yes.
Well, this person is pointing to that guy too. And this person is pointing to that guy too. So that by the time he becomes the hero of the people, there's a reason why he internalizes and understands. Because we get those great monologues from him, like, right? Isn't that justice? Or the scene that really, like, the one scene that just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb was what game were they playing? It wasn't tennis.
Is it badminton or something?
Badminton.
Yeah, badminton. And then the other guy dies. And then we don't revisit what happened there until the end of the movie where he's talking about that murder or that manslaughter. And then that becomes a part of his huge like salvo that he's giving to the magistrate to make sure that they're like, oh, it's all about justice. So there were some things where the puzzle pieces just felt like they put this one here, this one here, this one here, this one here. And from a story perspective, from a structure perspective, from a flow perspective, sometimes I butted up against it. I never grabbed my phone, like we've talked about that in the past, like a hallmark of a movie that has lost my interest is I'm like, what's going on in my email? I never did that. But I did drill into some points where I was like, that seems like a missed opportunity. That seemed weird. And it all pays off by the end. We get all of our answers to our questions. I just don't know if the hill he was climbing was graded well enough by the script. Yeah. It still was great. Again, I can't do it. But there were those moments where I was just like, okay, there, right there, right there. That said, some of the best dancing I've ever seen in my life.
We're just going to keep teasing that. But to play devil's advocate a little bit, I think, because I do mostly agree with you guys, but I'm just thinking so I think the motivation behind what he's trying to achieve, obviously he starts off at one place and it's we see that sort of change over time. And I do think they could have fleshed out the wife's character a bit more because she seemed to be the main driver as to why he's sort of doing a lot of things, like his wife and his family. I think there's a scene in between when they're leaving and his fellow advocate is telling him you got everything. Like, don't go after the CMs. Like, it's not going to make any sense here. Pin it on the engineer and you'll be done, or something like that. And she says something like, there's a conversation they have and he's like, look, he's innocent now. Like, why are you going on any further? I think her motivation changes from being proving he's innocent to being fighting for justice. Because she says some stuff like, why did you go to jail? Why was he beaten up for? Like, if we're doing this now, what's the point of all this? I think there was some character growth in that. But I think because they're just so far and few and they're mixed in between all these really big scenes, they kind of get lost. Yeah. I think that might have been what they were trying to do. I think the intention was there and they were trying to do it. But I think, as you said, there's a dramatic scene of some dude passing away, dramatically in a shuttlecock game. We have the passport scene. We have a lot of really, shuttlecock. We have all these sort of scenes coming and going, and it's like, okay, so I think some of her character, she's sort of isolated to just these small little dialogues and then disappears. I think her role, if it was a bit bigger, would have probably laid the foundation as to understanding his character more, because she's very important, and her Bertha's and her daughter is very important later on as well, to sort of why he does things. But I think that part was a little bit not tied in so well. So I think it was there, but just not executed as well. But look, a movie like this where it aims to do a lot and they packed in a lot to the story, and the focus I think was more about showing us how difficult it is to sort of get a task like this through. But it is possible if you go through these means. I think that was the focus, and they lost the character of basically both those characters in doing that. So yeah, I don't blame it too much. I think it's I still totally enjoyed it, but I think that's where some of the disconnect comes, and that becomes more present in the second half because we're kind of really we get the question as to why are you still doing this? We want the answer, and it's not told to us as clearly as we would like it to be. But overall, man, I think we can probably I just want to touch on a little bit about sort of the overall theme about this movie, because there was one line which was kind of a throwaway line-ish when sort of the press come and they talk about the BBC are there. It's got international media, and we got a little cameo appearance almost from Binti from Joji. Not sure if you recognize Doug. Yep, as the chief minister. Also, a small role, but she also did fantastic. It was pretty funny that he just went to the ancestral house and what do you call it? Got a video call with the CM. It's kind of ridiculous. But there's one throwaway line where it says something like, I think it's there's been 40,000 or 50,000 cases of road accidents. People have been injured and 4,000 or 5,000 people have been killed. So I think there were some bigger issues or some social commentary that they were trying to do with this movie, aside from just, fighting for the common man. But what were the sort of major themes you guys got out of this movie and about, the overall message this movie was trying to tell us, I guess?
Well,
for me,
I'll go quickly.
I'll go on. Yeah, go.
Sorry, man. Sorry. First time with 3, we're all doing okay, I think.
Yeah.
I think. I think it is that. It's justice, just blind justice. But truly, can justice be blind? And in this scenario, they found a way to really hit that, and I give it full marks for that. What I wished another theme would have really been was family, because we see Rajivan taking care of the father of his, girlfriend, the mother of his child. We see him ingratiating himself into that community via that initial montage. And I really wish that had pervaded. Like, there's a way that you can stack both of those things together so that it becomes extraordinarily clear. And it doesn't have to be like a Hollywood big, lights and all kinds of crazy stuff, and they walk out hand in hand. It doesn't have to be that, but there's a way that it could have given us both of those things. But we spend so much time with the fetch quests for the witnesses that we kind of lose an opportunity to do that. All the courtroom stuff, I think, is absolutely crucial and necessary to give us what we eventually get. Without it, the movie would have just been a kind of a hot mess. But that's where you're talking about. You're 100% right. The wife gets her lines, the girlfriend gets her lines to be able to deliver the motivation that he needs to be able to keep going and keep trying and keep standing up for himself. But if fighting for your family, fighting for the opportunity for your family to live in society without constantly being judged for a previous wrong, I wanted that to be there, because by the end, it's not a win necessarily just for them. It's a win for everybody. So his own personal win feels shrunken. So justice, absolutely. Yep. I just wish, the theme of doing what you have to do for your family and sometimes going above and beyond for your family had been there too, because we got teed up for that. And then it just kind of, sloped down.
Agreed.
Yeah. I don't know if it was, sorry, before I chuck it to you, man. Could we just, while you're sort of mentioning it, with it would have gone down more the path of Drishyam then, I guess, because that's what that movie sort of focused on. I think maybe there might have just been a conscious decision to be like, look, that's been done before.
Could very well be, yeah.
It could just have been just that. It could have just been that. But Sonny, man, I'll pass it to you to sort of talk about your themes.
Very quickly, just 2 points, I guess. The corruption issue seems to be such a live one in a lot of the movies we've watched. And what I liked about this film was examining a very specific type of corruption in quite a bit of detail. We are talking about what looks like fairly ordinary or banal actions that have truly significant consequences for the ordinary people with these potholes and the statistics that you quoted or the movie quoted in the film. But I liked getting into the minutiae of, so you got these contractors. These contractors removed their claws. That meant there was no people having maintenance of these potholes, and then this is what happened. I liked exploring that kind of very small scale corruption, but that has huge implications compared to something like Nna Than, where, the police and the politicians are in bed together and essentially just trying to pin a crime on someone, which is, not large scale in a way. Here it's showing corruption even on a small scale can have wide reaching implications. And I kind of appreciated that because there's a more nuanced kind of examination of what corruption can look like when it's not just that really obvious stuff like police and politicians working together to pin a crime on someone who didn't do it. The second thing, I think this film also occasionally touches on other kind of social norms or commentary. You have the romance between Rajivan and his wife Devi. There's a couple of lines where, they're not married formally and they've had a child out of wedlock. Nothing is really made of it, but there are a couple of comments here and there, and you just understand, okay, there's other things going on here. And I'm okay that they didn't explore that, because that would have been its own other movie potentially. But you got a little bit of these other circumstances that they're dealing with. Then you also had the is it the milk delivery guy who is selling drugs on this as a side hustle because his milk delivery business isn't actually profitable at all, or it's not enough money to make a living, which is hilarious. But also it was maybe making some sort of commentary about the fact that, there are some really poor people out there who have to resort to these kind of things to actually earn a living in these places. And I just thought it touched on a couple of things. And of course, you had the oil prices periodically rising. The financial implications of him needing a side hustle suddenly are in your focus a little bit more. So it kind of touches on these things, and I'm totally comfortable with them not exploring that further, because it's just tidbits of people's lives, and it just fleshes out this world a little bit more and makes it feel real. And, you know, you don't need to do a deep dive into every one of these issues. It was focused on the courtroom drama here. So yeah, I kind of appreciated some of those other themes that are hinted at.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought the milk delivery driver back. Johnny, who I am? Johnny, again, that's me. Johnny, me? I'm Johnny. Johnny, that's me. I loved that guy.
Love that guy.
Yeah, that's some pretty great characters in this. I think one thing that they might have been trying to do is, I think they were trying to tell us how basically, you know, if you attack issues at the root cause, then you're going to solve things. I think that's sort of what they were trying to go for. Because, yeah, it could have stopped in between at any time, right? But it doesn't solve the issue. And look, at the end of the day, the movie, you know, satirically tells us that whatever you do doesn't really change anything, because we get the ending of the pothole still being around and sort of saving him, which is ironic in its own way. But I think one thing they might have been striving for was just like, look, you know, if you stop at some certain point, it doesn't mean everything's going to be resolved. You have to keep going further and further, both at a society level and an individual level as well. I think that's what the metaphor was a little bit as well in there. So this movie had a lot to say. Like, you know, we've all sort of said sort of different points as to what this movie is about. So at the end of the day, it's actually, you know, a pretty ambitious movie to put this much in, along with the storyline that they were going with.
Sonny, we're literally just in what you said there, Sonny, I thought of like 9 other things that are just, you know, potential other social commentaries where they're really talking about it at that small level. And I really appreciated you saying that, because then I started thinking like, like here in America, and I'm sure it's the same in Australia, and I'm sure it's the same there. Generally, you try to go to the top and they send you all the way back down to the bottom. And then you're going for just, you know, you're essentially doing the next boss and the next boss and the next boss. And then who knows when the hell it's going to happen. And like we had said earlier, we're joking about earlier, sue me. Like, well, what if I find a way around that and I take you to court and we're not suing you, I'm accusing you of a crime. You know, that was a really clever way to kind of make it about something totally different. Because if we did the suing thing, then we would just have, you know, potentially liar, but like Malayalam liar, right? And we didn't need that. We threaded a lot of needles here. There were a few fibers just kind of sticking outside of the one, but it really was a lot of fun. Each of the characters, so each of the witnesses, even though we spent a lot of time going to get them, were great. I really enjoyed all of them, and everyone performed really, really well. And it really did just tell like a small scale story that had larger breaching implications, and justice was served. Very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I think we'll before we sort of wrap up and put our DCL, we have to talk about some of our favorite scenes. It's time now to talk about Kunchacko Boban and his dancing.
You want to get a little?
Oh my!
Want to get a little bit of one of these?
When he started doing that, I was just like, what is going on here? I have to just watch this. This is incredible. This is fantastic. Oh my God. I love that scene so much. And it's just, I think there's 2 scenes where he does the dancing. One is that scene, and one which cracked me up even more when he's escaping.
When he's running.
When he's trying to escape from the criminals. He's going to dance mode. He's like, forget it. I just have to dance in this crowd.
When he's
works everywhere.
He's like voguing in the middle of that crowd to try to blend in. And luckily, like the moment I saw that dance crew, I was like, oh yes, finally, we're going to get another dance scene, because that's how you can be a chameleon and blend in there, is just dancing erratically and wildly the way that he does. But it just like, it was such a moment of pure levity and showing you who this character is, that is just somebody who, I think, you know, if you're looking for kind of a meta reason for it, like he just acts without abandon, right? He's just feeling it. So he's doing what he feels, you know, and that was a great way to kind of show that. And I cannot believe that is not like the biggest meme fodder. Like, I want that as a GIF on my phone that I can send to you every day. You know what I mean? Like, we can work on it. I want to be able to react to everything if my wife texts me from the grocery store, I want to be able to send her that. Like, should we have steak tonight? Like, yes, this one 7 times. It's one of the best things I've ever seen.
Can I also say, in that scene, part of the hilariousness was when they zoom into the face of the cops who are watching him dance, and then he looks at them for about 3 seconds and continues dancing, and continues to dance his way out of the situation, which I just thought was deeply hilarious.
It was amazing. That was fantastic.
It was so good. Also, shout out to the other dance crew, the disco crew. That whole dance sequence of those in the glittery shirts and everything. I was like, wow, this place looks like the place to be. Seriously, like, if they're doing this kind of stuff, these kind of festivals, and they're just dancing like this.
Yeah, whatever that church is, I want to go there. Where like they just do that periodically, like what, quarterly? How could you? That's a lot to plan. First off, and second, like it's a lot of fun. But yeah, when they all stopped at the end of the number and the hooligans, the thugs were looking at them, they were all like, "Don't move. I think they're from the committee. We won't get paid if they don't think we're doing well." They're just stuck there in place.
Good.
Oh man, so funny. The other scene I want to give a special mention to, which is also found, oh my god, like laugh out loud on the floor, hilarious in this one, was the scene with the two older ladies at the police station.
Oh yeah,
yes.
And they're just saying like,
one of them verbally abused me, but I can't tell you what because we're both going through our penance or religious period at this time.
Oh my god, it's such a funny situation. And they're just like sitting. There was a scene with like 3 other women and brokers in the back. I'm not sure if there's some other statement on that we should maybe went above our heads, for instance. But I just found it so funny that they just, the way they delivered those lines and they just deadpan telling him, and the cop is just like, what do you want me to do here? Like how do you want me to press a case? You can't even say it. Like, small scene, but it was so funny.
That was great. I also love the other policeman who's like new on the job. That kind of friend to him. Yeah, he's so diligent, but so kind, where he's like, okay, I'm going to read you your rights now. All right. First day on the job. This is my first arrest. Okay, here we go. We're doing it together. Like just the way that he kind of played it. And again, to your point, Sonny, where you were like, there was no corruption from the police other than the ones at the very beginning who are like, well, somebody else's problem now. Like all the police that we see are pretty great,
Trying to do a good job.
Every time that the magistrate is like, police, did you hear that? Yes. Like they're never shown in a bad light,
No.
And that was really cool to see. But his like kind of very, very squeaky clean, almost Boy Scout way of playing the policeman really killed me.
Definitely. Yeah, man. Lots to like about this. I think we can sort of wrap it up, man. This has been so much fun. This has been so great. So much to talk about this movie, and this has been an absolute privilege to talk to you both about this movie, man.
It's been a blast.
Can wrap it up. Let's just go around the table for the D scale. Where does this fall? I'll pass it to you, Sonny, first. Where would you rate this movie?
I reckon this is a dynamite, probably on the lower end of the scale. I think ultimately I just had a lot of fun with this movie. It was kept me on the edge of my seat, had me laughing out loud, great performances all around. Loved the little tidbits of life that we got thrown in, whether it's the 2 women making a complaint, the Kunchacko Boban dance. There was so much in there that was just deeply hilarious, and great music wasn't too bad here as well. I didn't mention that kind of first song that sets up the romance. I was at the start, I was kind of like, oh, this is a bit cheesy, but they are able to develop a romance in the space of a song, which is completely believable, which I thought was a really solid effort. You achieved that without 25 pages of dialogue. Not a bad effort. So I thought that was really well done as well. So look, really enjoyed the satire. Loved that there was kind of a good representation of the legal system. And yeah, just a really fascinating story and a lot of fun.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm going to the exact same thing you said, low end of the dynamite spectrum, because I'd still watch it again and I had a great time. It just ultimately felt like there were a couple of things that like, man, we could have gone there. We could have done this. We could have done that. And if we're looking at what the movie's conclusion is, there are a few things that really kind of buck up against that when it comes to all that stuff. But yeah, the montage at the beginning of the movie is where all of my kind of puzzle piece stuff starts.
Anchored the film,
right? That's where I felt I was like, this is where we're learning who this character is and what he wants and what he's going to do. It's all right here. So by the time we get to, he just took down the infrastructure of the city, it just kind of, it didn't juxtapose, or it was too much of a juxtaposition for me to luckily, the movie's 2.5 hours long. We spend a hell of a lot of time in court. We have some awesome pigeon action. We get this great dancing. I laughed my ass off a lot, but and I'm glad we were able to have a discussion. Like I said, right before we recorded, if I had said one more time, like, I loved it, everyone should watch it, I would have felt like a heel.
Yeah.
And again, it's not a criticism, just saying, man, I wish there was a little bit more here. Because I guarantee you all of these questions got asked, and every one of these decisions was a conscious cut to say, like, yeah, well, we can't make a 4-hour movie. So I wish it had been a TV show.
Yeah, they're definitely right. I'm on the same page as you guys. It's probably I'd say I put it like it's not a perfect movie. It definitely has some flaws, which we actually discussed quite well in this review here. So I think it's there. But overall, what I remember from this movie is definitely the comedy. I think the comedy is probably the first thing I remember. And aside from that, probably just the intriguing plotline as well was really, it was captivating and entertaining. If you just throw away some of the things that you kind of wanted to explore and you just go with, all right, they're doing what they can with whatever they're thinking. And that's okay. But yeah, look, I would highly recommend this to anybody. But yeah, guys, this has been an absolute blast. We'll make sure to try and do more of these 3 podcast sessions. Awesome. So
yeah, Sonny, you and I will get on a wavelength here soon enough. Luckily, it worked out really well today, and this was awesome. Hearing your perspective on this was you were fantastic, man. There were multiple times where I was just like, I'll just go over there and watch. This was great.
Absolute joy of podcasting with you, Doug. We've got to do this more because we vibe so well.
Yeah, here's hoping.
Definitely. No, we'll make it happen. But cool, guys. Let us know your comments. Let us know what you thought about this movie. Looking forward to seeing you guys again. So,
thanks as always, guys.
Gotcha, guys.